Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to another Victorious Friday. Today, as I always say, I have a special guest with me today. Man, we have not chatted in so many years, but today I have a good friend by the name of John Beckett. John, good morning. Welcome to the show, Victorious Friday.
Good morning to you, Terrence. Yeah, it's been a few years, but it's great to reconnect.
It really is. Well, John, as we go back and I think about so many things you've done, I mean, an author, uh, business leader, but most importantly, a husband, a father, and now a grandfather. And catch me up a little bit on what's been taking place. Give the folks a little bit of who you are, what you've done, and I'm trying to keep up with the grandkids at this point. Just kind of fill us in with some details.
Well, I know you're a family first guy, and probably a landmark coming up that I would note is that Wendy and I will have been married 60 years in August.
Wow.
And we're just very grateful for those decades together. And she's been the attentive grandmother and overseeing 18 grandchildren now, gifts
18.
to our 6 children. And so, yeah, we have a good flock, and family's obviously a huge part of our lives.
Well, I love the fact, I want to first start out, and let's just start with family. Let's go back a little bit because, I mean, there's some history there that I'm excited about. I know you just wrote maybe last year or so, a book around some experiences. I'm trying to remember if your grandfather or your father's experiences from the war and so many other things. But give us a little bit of an update of your early years in life when you were coming up as a child, and what was it like in the home? Was church a part of your regular, weekly activities? Just kind of give us a little feel for those early days.
I think maybe we'll go back to talk a bit about my father, and my grandfather does enter that equation. But for purposes of your question here, I grew up in a home, 2 sisters, both younger, and it was a home, as you might imagine, in the 1940s and 50s, with the tension of the Second World War as a backdrop. My dad had started a business in the basement of our home in 1937. And so it was significantly impacted during those war years. And that was really the context in which I was beginning to discover what the world was all about. It was war, it was a startup business, it was all the tensions surrounding that. And we did attend church. My parents had grown up with an Anglican background. Actually, my mother Methodist, my father Anglican in Canada. And so it was a part of our routine. It was not life-changing experience for me until later, but we were dutiful about trying to participate in a local church assembly. So our context for growing up was really a warm, loving, but very focused family on trying to succeed during a difficult period of time.
Yeah, I think back to then, and the tensions that play out today are much different than our lifetime back then. Uh, when you go, I'm going to stay here just for a moment. When you think about those early days and, the father being in the business and so forth, marketplace, and that's carried on in your generation and also your sons, hasn't it?
Yeah, I had no idea that I would go into
Mhm.
family business. In fact, I was an engineering student and focused on the aerospace area where I worked for some years.
Mhm.
And we lived in the same town as my parents, and we're having dinner with them one evening. And my dad said, almost as casually as you'd ask about the weather, John, my business partner is going to retire. How'd you like to come to work for me? And that was in the early 60s. And I was surprised at my answer. Frankly, I just said, it sounds really good. When can we start? And so I began working with him. And the company was small, Terrence. We had 12 employees at the time, but it had a good foundation. And I looked toward him as my mentor. And I thought it would be at least another decade. Well, that wasn't the case. He had a heart attack just a year later, driving to work, and it was fatal. And so at age 26, I was thrust into leading the small business. And I had all the doubts that a 26-year-old would normally have about taking that assignment on, but with encouragement from my mother and others, I put my head down and began building the business. Well, it's been a journey of a lifetime, and it has been a lifetime. So we're now in 13 different locations and 3 different continents and about 1,000 employees. And so it's been an amazing journey in business. Yes, we have sons and a son-in-law heading our companies today. So we've embraced the vision of a family business that retains the characteristics that are unique to a family business.
Mm-hmm. Well, today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to jump right into the show. And I wanted you guys to get an idea who's on the call today. We're talking, a person who has successfully transitioned or succeeded his business to his sons and his son-in-law, coming from a third generation with his father. And so we see this transition, which is very rare. But today we're going to talk about, and what Victoria's family is about family and home. And there's always this tension between how to balance home and business priorities. And I'm sure John's going to be able to share a lot with that, because in starting a business or really just kind of building that business to where it is today, I'm sure there's been many tensions between home and business. But today's topic, as we jump into it, we're going to conclude in how to navigate raising a family with these biblical principles, with love, discipline, and fun, but also building a business in the marketplace. So John, welcome. I'm so excited. Give us the early days. Give us a glimpse of the early days as you were entered into the marketplace, into the business. What were some of the challenges that you had to take on, and just kind of take us through some of those early days.
Well, if some of the folks you're interacting with, Terrence, are in business, they would understand that there's just a whole set of unique challenges to somebody who's in a business where they're owners, where they're deeply involved. It's never an 8 to 5 proposition. And it's something that embraces your whole thinking and personality. And that's where this rub can come in with being a parent and a husband and raising a family, because we tend to think in terms of trade-offs, don't we? That if we're going to be all in our business endeavors, and to be successful, you have to be all in, and yet be successful as a parent, you got to be all in there too. You can't outsource that. You have to be there as a parent. And so, for quite a while, I kind of visualized this as a balance beam, or like a teeter-totter. One side goes up, the other goes down, and you're looking for that balance point. I'm not sure that that's actually the best image of it. It's maybe the best analogy is in marriage. It's not a 50-50 proposition. It's 100-100 now. With your math background, you can understand that conceptually that creates some problems, but I think the application of it here is that we have to be fully engaged in whatever sphere we're involved in. And so in the business sector, I have to be giving that my best. I can't just give it part of an effort. But at the same time, when I'm with family, I have to give that my best. So that's behind the idea of 100-100. It's yes, there are competing priorities, and we have to make choices. But I think if we allow the Lord to guide this process, He'll give us the time and the energy and the capacity that we need for each of these two very critical spheres.
You know, they say the greatest gap in for any person is that we know what to do, but then the idea is the gap comes in doing it, right? So it's like, I know what to do, but I don't do it, right? Or maybe I don't do it as well as I like to do it, or maybe as I plan to do it because life gets in the way. You know, when you think of the early days, or even, you know, through the years, as you were trying to balance, or really not balance, but have 100% in one seat and 100% in another seat, that's a lot of seats.
Yeah.
What were some of the ways that you were able to accomplish that? How were you able to accomplish it? If I know you probably weren't perfect at it, and I'm not saying that you were,
No, for sure I
uh,
wasn't. Well,
but how did you get through it? What were some best practices?
yeah, I think without over spiritualizing it, I do want to say that the Lord will help us achieve excellence in whatever our assignment is. And these are two primary assignments. He made us part of family, and He made us to work. Work is a God-given trait. It's a value. And so we can do both with excellence. In fact, it's kind of interesting, Terrence. I was thinking about this matter of tension a while back, and I felt the Lord showed me something that that He would give me exactly the amount of time that I need to do what He wants me to do. I just pause on that for a minute, because if it's the Lord's doing, He'll give me the time that I need on what He wants me to do. So if I'm spending time on things that He doesn't want me to do, things are going to get off kilter, right? But if there are things that He wants me to do, so both of these priorities that we're talking about, work and family, are part of His design, and He wants us to do it well. He'll give us the time that we need. So best practices, I would say the number one is that when we come home from work, we need to be all in with our family, so that if we're with one of our youngsters, we're engaged over dinner or whatever, we're not torn in multiple directions. We're giving our best to that portion of time, which for a 6-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 17-year-old, for them is their world. And we shouldn't be just giving part of ourselves to that. Does that mean going to every sporting event, to every meeting with our kids? Not necessarily. I think there will be grace for us to pick and choose, but if we're careful about it, I believe that He'll allow us to engage our kids at the point of greatest meaning, the point of greatest leverage, and understand that we can't be there for everything, and we can't be totally present. It just doesn't work that way. But when we are with them, we can give it our very best.
Yeah, you know, it reminds me of a story. You know, when I owned my own business for 10 years, and I just remember the first 4 years, you know, I was just coming out of corporate America. You know, I had 4 or 5 weeks vacation. You know, I could get away and take breaks and so forth, and with the family. And then I started this, you know, crazy restaurant business, and never wanted to go in the restaurant business. We were just buying different businesses, but that was just happened to be the first one we bought. And boy, I tell you, that's the hardest job I think I've ever done in my life. But I went to 98, simply, I mean, very easily 80, 90 hours a week. And I remember for the first 4 years, never taking a vacation. So the shock that it was to my family, from 4 or 5 weeks vacation together and time together to no vacation for 4 years. And, it came a point I just said, Lord, I can't do this anymore. I mean, we had abdicated people taking our kids to church and so many other things. We were just working 7 days a week, 364, because we were in the mall, so it was always open.
Mhm.
And I said, Lord, I just, this isn't the way we want to move forward. We need to, we love the business, it's doing well. But I need at least Sunday off, and not just have Sunday off, but not worry about Sunday, right? Not worry about who's going to show up and who's not going to show up, because in the restaurant, if no one shows up, you're the emergency help. And so all of a sudden, Sunday started to open up for me, and I didn't have to go to work on Sunday for 6 years,
Mm.
unless I needed to just pop in or something of that nature. And then I became a Bible study fellowship leader, discussion leader. And so I needed Saturday off, which is the most important day for a restaurant and in a mall. And so all of a sudden I needed Saturday. So I'm praying, Lord, I need Saturday morning off. And next thing I know, I'm off Saturday. And then I said, when I became a Bible study fellowship teaching leader, I needed Monday off because the men's session was on Monday night and needed to prepare for that. And so he gave me Monday off. And so by the time it was done, I said, I'm turning it all over to you, Lord, and I want peace through this process and joy. I ended up only having to go in 1 day a week. If I chose to. I went in more than that, but that was necessary. One of the things I learned, John, is I thought that I was the only one that could do it perfectly.
Mm.
And I wasn't abdicating the responsibility to leaders in my organization. And in this case, I was doing all the leadership stuff. I was doing the scheduling and so forth, because I wasn't trusting the leaders, and we were already in a small margin business. And so to lose 2% was quite significant in the restaurant business. But one of the things I found is I needed to trust.
Mm.
I needed to, one, trust in the Lord that he would provide the time needed for me and not worry about it. And secondly, I needed to trust in myself to the point that I would trust my staff, that they were properly trained to do the job, even beyond what I was allowing them to do. And that freed me up mentally, physically, spiritually, to say, hey, I'm okay. I'm gonna spend time and prioritize my kids. So I just brought that story to mind as you were speaking. You
That's
know,
beautiful. It's a beautiful story. And when you think about all of the side benefits that
mm,
came about through that, one
mhm,
of which is that you're putting greater responsibility on members of your team,
yeah,
and that became a growth path for them, right?
yes,
So they could develop more fully because they were feeling some of that weight of responsibility.
mhm,
So it was, in that sense, it was really kind of a win-win
mhm,
situation. You got
mhm,
more time and they got more responsibility, and you found a way to manage that business. Yeah, it's you're what you've described there is really a classic example of how we can get caught up. And by God's grace, if we can do a reset of the
mhm,
kind that you did,
yeah,
before we burn out, uh,
mhm, mhm,
because you can't sustain that kind of
yeah,
activity and not pay a big price for it.
yeah. And how beneficial it was, John, because the Lord started opening up multiple locations, right? And I had to duplicate myself. And now I had people ready to step in leadership positions that I would not have had if I would not have turned this thing over and think that I'm the only guy that could do it. Well, they could do it much better than me. And if given the opportunity. So sometimes we just need to trust that process that we have in place and say we have prepared our team well to lead in some cases if we allow them to lead, right? We don't have to do it all. And they may not do it as perfectly as you, but that's okay. I mean, you
I
don't
think
need to,
a,
you know.
a gift to us is when we realize that we don't have to do it all.
Yes.
A
Yes.
gift to us is when we realize that other people can even do it better.
Yes. That's right.
Because now we're sharing leadership with others, and I, um, I think that that really is God's design.
Mhm.
Uh, we think about the way that the Apostle Paul uses the analogy of the body. You know, not everybody's an ear, not
That's
everybody's a
right.
nose, and it's this concept of people working together. And there's life, there's harmony that comes out of that, there's
Mhm.
productivity that comes out of it. And so, yeah, it really is a trap to think that
Mhm.
we have to do it all or we're the only ones that can do it.
Yeah.
Uh, and we get past that, it's really a kind of freedom for us.
Mhm. Well, it reminded me, of a conversation we were having. You were talking about, some of the experiences that you had as a father and so forth, and having simple as having meals together. When things begin to open up and change, and parenting, oversight at the home is so critical, especially in a day and age where two parents are either having to work or need or just choosing to work outside the home. When we were growing up, I think we could say at least one parent was always at home for the most part. And things now, it's very difficult to find two parents at home. In some cases, to find any biological parent at home is even a challenge these days. And then, I just remember you talking about how to navigate raising the family with biblical principles. And that's what this show is all about. And we could have taken it from many places, Deuteronomy, so forth, but we landed on Ephesians 6:4. Fathers, really saying parents, don't exasperate your children, which I was getting A+ in sometime, but it says to train and instruct them in the Lord. And there's some good benefits that come from that, just as we would train and instruct our employees in the principles and values and the culture, so we can have that culture. It's also the same thing at home, isn't it? So I think talk to me, John, about the three principles that you mentioned and any others, and maybe tell a story in raising kids in this biblical principle home. And you talked about the principles of love and discipline and fun. And I love that word fun because you wanted to make sure it wasn't, just beating them over the head. Uh, Tell us some stories about it, or just talk about that a little bit to set it up.
One of the realities that came to me in child rearing was that we're building our children for release.
Mm.
We're building our children for an exit ramp where we actually want to bless them moving out of the family and into the next phase of their lives. If we don't have that mindset, then there can be an inordinate clinging to, holding on to, unwillingness to deal with tough issues. But if we have that mindset that come at some point, it's not a magical age, but maybe it's 18, 19, 20, that they need to move out on their own. I think that helps to drive some of the practices that we follow
Mhm.
as parents. Now, the three that you mentioned, Wendy and I kind of latched on to as a three-part emphasis that we wanted to be mindful of, and just to expand on them. The three were love, discipline, and fun, as you mentioned. And of these, of course, the greatest is love. And if you have a context and family where children know they're loved, it's not based on their performance, it's based on them as a person. The security that comes out of that it can't even be measured. And of course, what it's modeling is God's love for us, which is unconditional, right? It's not performance-based. It's unconditional. So if that kind of love is experienced by our children growing up, it just covers a multitude of speed bumps that we inevitably go over. Well, the second seems like it's contradictory with that, the concept of discipline. But the reality is that as we are raising children, we're trying to help them understand that life has boundaries. Life has lanes that we have to move in, and there are consequences for moving outside of those lanes, which every child, and certainly I did growing up, have to be brought back in. I'll tell you a funny story. I was out in the front lawn playing football with our three sons one time, and I had the youngest son on my team, and the two other guys were clearly cleaning our clock. And so rather arbitrarily, I just said, I'm going to change the boundary lines of this football field. In fact, we're going to come up with a new name for it. It's going to be called relative football, and only our youngest son and I can go into that new territory. And you could see the frustration mounting with the other two guys. And finally, they said, let's call a halt to everything. Dad, we need rules. we need boundaries. And so, you know, the humor of that story came home to them in a way that became a life lesson, actually, that we have to move within appropriate boundaries. And then the third, as you cited, Terrence, is fun. I just think it is so important that families enjoy being with each other. And you know, life is serious, life is hard. There are many challenges, but if we can get away and do something together, if we can just kick back and kind of get into our kids' world, which may mean down on the floor, rolling around and and being crazy, it's endearing. And these are things that that our children remember about growing up. And so we're building toward release, but we're investing them in a way that will enable them to go out and stand in this harsh world that we all live in.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that story. And you say we're going to change the rule. We're going to recreate some boundaries because we're getting our clock cleaned here. So we've got to reestablish some stuff. And you know, that helped me to think about the tensions, right? I mean, we're coming off of, I mean, in my lifetime, one of the greatest pandemics that we would ever experience with COVID-19, and just, man, what that did to family and businesses and tensions that created. And I know you've written some books on business. You've written books like Loving Monday and Mastering Monday. And we always speak about, you know, we're not just to be Christians on Sunday. We've got to put that hat on Monday through Saturday as well, Monday through Friday. And then you talked about, you know, just, you know, other books that was produced. But when you think about Loving Monday and Mastering Monday, kind of put your business hat on. How were you able to do that in your life and your career, to love Monday, you know, but balance the rest of the week and mastering it? Give us a little bit of insight as to what encouraged you to write the books, and secondly, maybe one or two principles that you can pull out of there that can help our business leaders out there, or really parents just trying to balance it all. You know, I think about my daughter, for example. She has one little one, her and her husband, and now they're pregnant with twins. And so I don't know how we're gonna get through this one. This is our first twins, and on either side of the family. And we just went and visited a couple of weeks ago, and and she's got a huge job now. And I'm like, man, how do you guys balance? You know, he's working, she's working, one kid, two on the way, you know, and you got a house, you got everything else going on. How do you love Monday, but also prioritize it so you can, you know, make sure you have time? But maybe let's dive into this Loving Monday and Mastering it, and
Yeah,
just
well,
some
let me just
experiences.
take you back a few years, because when I became a believer, I didn't have any context for how a believer functions in the workplace. I actually thought that if you were serious about being a Christian, you needed to go into some kind of church related work or mission work or ministry. And yet I wasn't wired that way. I just, my background was in engineering. My family context was in business. And I came to the point, Terrence, where I was willing to go anywhere, do anything. I totally laid down my own priorities. And when I did, something pretty amazing happened. I sensed the Lord was saying to me, John, I've called you to business. I want you to do it with all your heart. Well, a call to business, could there be such a thing? I mean, in the world as I understood it, that was antithetical. It didn't equate. But I came to see that God is a God who works. He's a God who is able to be as present in the workplace as he is anywhere else. Our Lord Jesus Christ surrounded himself with people out of the marketplace, and he used examples frequently in his parables about people from the marketplace. The sower went out to sow. And so as I studied the scriptures and as I sought to integrate them in every way that I could into our work, I came to the realization that we've been sold a bill of goods in Western culture, and that bill of goods is that there's a higher and lower, that there's a noble and ignoble. And what I discovered, Terrence, is that way of thinking actually goes back to the Greeks as much as 1,000 years before Christ. But that's not the biblical view at all. And so the writing that I did was to start unpacking the way in which God has designed work and designed us for work. And the second book, we think of great people out of the scriptures, whether it's Joseph or Daniel or Moses or Nehemiah, names that are very familiar to us if we study the Bible through their biblical endeavors. But think about the fact that Moses had to lead 3 million people. What would that assignment look like? What did it look like for Nehemiah to pack up, move to an area that was under distress, and mobilize a whole nation of people toward building their security? And you could say the same about Joseph. Daniel, of course, was like a prime minister under several different kings. Well, these were secular jobs, but they made them full-time service. And so the writing that I did was to help people just set aside this mindset of secular and sacred and embrace a holistic view in which all of life can be sacred if we do it unto the Lord. That's basically the central thesis. And of course, the scriptures have a lot to say about this when we look at the word of God through that lens.
Yeah, that's powerful, John. Yeah, I was just thinking of some principles there. One, I think you would agree that, God is in control, and he gives us the business to steward, but he's the owner of that business. And I think about the principle I know you live by, that prayer is a lifeblood of who you are and what you do. And also, I'm sure it played a major role in the marketplace and in your business walk, business life and experience. Things like knowing that integrity is a non-negotiable. To think that we have to be people of integrity and run our businesses that way, and we have to honor our people. They have intrinsic value, and if we focus on their value and optimize that, we'll have a thriving business as well. And I just think about these principles that although we are to lead our companies for Christ, doesn't mean our companies are necessarily better, but they should be, right? We strive for excellence, but we certainly must be different. And when I think about those type of principles, and we're in pursuit of his eternal objectives, not our temporal objectives, it really changes the perspective of a business leader, doesn't it?
You know, it may just be by coincidence, but in your comments just now, you have actually cited what we treat as our three core values.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah. So, and I'll just repeat them. Integrity, excellence, and a profound respect for the individual. I mean, you said it. You could be writing our corporate handbook, Terrence, because they're there in your DNA. You're just so naturally drawn to these beautiful concepts that are very applicable in business settings, but also have their roots in biblical truth.
Yeah.
And so that, that's what makes these values come alive. And
that's right.
Yeah, but you just summarized it beautifully.
Well, hey, you know what, John, I always can be, I learn from some great people like you, and, the Lord just knits our hearts together, man. Well, I want to take this last moment of our conversation, and I want to just turn it over to you. You can go anywhere you want to go. I mean, you can go places like the letters from the war letters. You can go to maybe an experience at home. You can go to something around business and succession. I want to let you take it wherever you want to take it. But at the end, tell us a story and give us one principle that you would like our audience to walk away from this broadcast, from this episode with. John, the floor is yours. Bless those.
Well, Terrence, you're great at just providing a wide open stage and a wide open microphone, and I'll try to use that responsibly. You mentioned the war letters, and we haven't talked about that, but we did allude to my dad and even his father earlier in the conversation. Let me just say a bit more about that. My dad, at age 17, went into the First World War. Now, there aren't so many people around who are direct descendants of First War veterans today, but I'm one of them. And a few years ago, I discovered copies of letters that he had written home from the Western Front in France during that war. He was with the Canadian forces, which were under British command. And I began a deep dive into what would have been his experience during that time, but also the war itself, making visits to France and Belgium and museums all over the place, and just studying this period of history. Well, along the way, I realized that my grandfather, my father's father, wrote or sent packages to my dad on the average every other day for 3 years. And my father, as he was able, would write back handwritten letters. So I just find this amazing, because in our current framework of instant communication, we would understand that a letter being written by my grandfather to my dad had to go on a troop carrier. It had to go across the North Atlantic. It was always subject to submarine warfare. When it arrived at a destination, it had to be transported across land in some kind of carrier mechanism. And so you can imagine my dad opening a letter from home after 3, 4, 5 weeks of travel just to get there, and what that meant. So to be able to get that repeating every other day, I just find it astounding. And to me, it's a tremendous example of an influence that shaped who my dad was. See, I got to know him as a business leader and as my father, But this deep dive helped me understand that there were roots that went right back to how he interacted with his dad. And so in this period of time when fatherhood is being minimized and cheapened in many ways, I'm happy to cite an example from more than 100 years ago of how a father and a son built a relationship at a distance that shaped my dad's character for the rest of his life. So we can't minimize these things. And of course, we don't have to do it through letters. We can do it through hugs, which was a world they didn't even know. So Terrence, I'll hold this up. This was the book that I wrote called The War Letters, and it was about his experiences, but also especially the principal influences that helped shape who he was. So I know in the interest of time, we want to fast forward here, and you ask for some kind of a wrap-up thought, a wrap-up principle, and I could go many different directions with that. I think that if I were to summarize it in just a couple words, it would be to focus on the faithfulness of God. And if your folks, and I know you're reaching people all over the world, could adopt what has become so meaningful to me, that God is faithful, a phrase that we see in different places in the scripture, but it's a reality. God loves us and he is faithful. He is always working toward our benefit and our good, even though it may not seem like it in a certain situation. He's faithful, and he is trying to build us toward eternity. And so that's that. Our view of God, in a way, shapes everything, doesn't it? And if our view of God is one who loves us and is faithful towards us, it just puts everything else in place as we walk through the challenges of life.
John, I knew you would land the plane. And I mean, that's a perfect parting message that as Revelation says, he's not only faithful, but he's true.
Yeah.
And in a period of time where people are even questioning the very existence of God and who he is, this is so much of a powerful statement that you just made, that he is faithful, he is true, and he is a loving God. And as you say, he's preparing us through the power of the Holy Spirit for eternity, but also to live a life today that glorifies him and enjoys him, and that we can share his gospel, proclaim his truth. So I know that none of us strive, we're not perfect, but we are trying to live in those type of spirits, and a spirit of to glorify him. And John, I think of you, you'll never say this, and so I will, but you have been just a blessing to many. You've been a model and to me, and I look up to you and say, here's a guy who's done it well. And I just think about a legacy that you're leaving in your family, with your sons, with your son-in-law. I've seen you do succession better than I've seen anybody do it. And
well, that's a big honor coming
yeah.
from you, Terrence. And it's yeah, I think that by God's grace, he's enabled us to take the long view here. And there are challenges every day in life. In fact, Jesus said as much. He said, in this world, you'll have trouble. He didn't mince words, but then he said, but be of good cheer. I've overcome the world. And so challenges are part of life. Overcoming them is a chief joy in life. But as we take the long view, and I'm in my 80s now, and so I can look back over decades, and I can see the faithfulness of God, and I can see how critical it is that we walk carefully, that we be faithful ourselves, even as he's faithful to us, that we be faithful to our wives, our children, our responsibilities. And, that concept of finishing well, I think, should be a driving motivation for all of us.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, here we are again. We've just finished, man, amazing episode, John Beckett. I wish I could go on for 2-3 more episodes and 2-3 more hours, but due to time permission, John has been so generous with his time. John, thank you so much for sharing today. I want to leave with a little bit of advertising, though. Where can we get this amazing book that you just held up? I think it's The War Letters. Is that the name of it?
We actually have a website, just
Mhm.
warletters.com.
Okay.
And you can actually read it online. We've tried to make it very
Okay.
accessible to people.
Yeah.
And the other books, Loving Monday, Mastering Monday, they're available in multiple ways. But
Okay.
they together they kind of constitute part of what we've tried to walk through here in our lives.
Well, thank you again, my friend. TheWarLetters.com. Please look that up. I'm sure on any Amazon, etc. you can find Loving Monday and Mastering Monday. John, thank you so much. Thank you for your heart. Thank you for your friendship. And it's been way too long. Don't let another, years go by without us talking as this time. I just enjoy you, brother. And by the way, you still owe me a visit to Ohio. I need to come visit you and check you out, man. So thank you so much. Appreciate you. Love you. And say hello to the boys for me.
Thanks, Terrence. God bless you and your work.
Okay.
Thank